Hello, my name is Austin Belzer. Welcome to the Austin B Media podcast review of my Spiral from the Book of Saw review. If you'd like to read it rather than listen to it, you can do so at austinb.media/spiral-review. I'll have the link to that in the show notes, but without further ado, let's go. 16 years ago, James Wan and Leigh Whannell released Saw into the world, with the reserved tale of a photographer named Adam, who is played by Leigh Whannell, and oncologist Dr. Lawrence Gordon, played by Cary Elwes, who are trying to make their way out of a filthy bathroom. In the years since, there have been 8 films, not including Spiral, a total franchise box office of more than $1 billion on a combined budget of $72 million. 2 video games made by THQ, a comic book prequel, and several theme park attractions. A lot has changed in the horror film genre since the original Saw was released. When Jigsaw was released, films like The Conjuring, Insidious, which features a Wan-Whannell reunion, The Purge, The Gift, The Visit, and many more changed the way audiences looked at horror films. Gone was the shock and awe factor that Saw relied so heavily upon. Now, audience had the options of subgenres like psychological horror, paranormal horror, and a new advent of comedy and monster horror. So when provided that choice of old horror versus new, audiences didn't respond and the Saw franchise went dormant. Well, it was dormant. Then Chris Rock entered the picture with a pitch for a Saw film that introduced comedy and social commentary into the franchise. So 7 years later, does Chris Rock inject new life into a franchise that already tried a revival 7 years earlier? Surprisingly, yes. However, those changes cause huge compromises that franchise fans might not be able to overlook. The most significant change is that I don't even believe I can call Spiral from the Book of Saw an entry in the Saw franchise. To me, the trademarks of a Saw film are the following. The plot revolves around a jigsaw game being played that has a hidden message for the players of the game, a team of police officers trying to find said players before the game is over, flashbacks to events that happened well before the game ever took place, the game progressively getting more gruesome, and a number of twists that would make M. Night Shyamalan blush. None of these trademarks are within the film, save for the team of police officers and the flashbacks. The thought that keeps circling my mind almost a week after seeing it is that the film feels like Law & Order Saw Edition. So much of Spiral's identity is found in Detective Zeke's, who's played by Chris Rock, investigation into the Jigsaw copycat to the point that it feels very much like a cop procedural rather than a horror film. What director Darren Lynn Bousman provides us with instead of traps is quite literally Zeke either driving to a crime scene or waiting around for a crime scene to pop up. Out of the less than 6 traps, if I recall right, within the film, I think that we only got to see the setup for the entirety of 2 or 3 traps, one of which is teased and shown later in the film. I understand the need for Spiral to stand apart from other Saw films, but I don't think this was the right way to go about it, especially when the investigative scenes feel relevant to the larger narrative of the plot. Thankfully, Chris Rock carries this movie enough to where I wasn't upset. Chris Rock injects some much-needed humor into the franchise with diatribes like why there wasn't a Forrest Gump sequel, or why his new partner, Detective William Schenck, played by Max Minghella, should cherish the moments he has as a rookie. The only problem I have with Rock's performance is that his attempt at portraying a grizzled detective while also cracking jokes doesn't mesh well for a horror film. Sometimes I was taken aback at how often the film relied on Rock to deliver a cool one-liner before moving on to the next scene. Additionally, Jordan Oram's cinematography evokes what I would call classic Saw. The film is color graded in harsh yellow, greens, blues, and the editing makes effective use of the speed ramping and odd angles to communicate at characters at a disadvantage, something that the Saw franchise is quite known for. As for the writing, it's about as bad as it gets. The entire plot hinges on a reveal, and the rest of the plot clearly didn't matter to screenwriters Josh Stolberg and Peter Goldfinger. Character motives are unclear throughout the entirety of the film, the traps don't make any narrative sense, and the misdirects laced throughout could only fool a newcomer to the franchise. Spiral from the Book of Saw is like the weird stepchild of the Saw franchise. It tries to get you to like it with its new ideas, but in the process never feels more than a Law & Order spinoff in the Saw franchise. Even then, when it tries to do with that formula, it miserably fails at. I rated Spiral from the Book of Saw 2 out of 5 stars. You can catch Spiral from the Book of Saw in theaters nationwide, starting on May 15th. I want to thank Thomas Stoneham Judge from moviesforreal.net, Shane Kanto, who you can see on his YouTube channel, The Wasteland Reviewer, as well as Sif Pop, and Joseph Davis, again, from Sif Pop, for supporting Austin B Media on Patreon. You can help support what I do here at Austin B Media by supporting me on Patreon every month. Head to the show notes for a link. And if you want to follow me on social media, you can follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Austin B Media, Twitter at Austin B Media _ at the end there. You can subscribe to me on YouTube at Austin B Media, on Spotify at Austin B Music, and if that doesn't work, at Bladed Tech. Sometimes either or works. And in the meantime, if you want to read a newsletter, I put up a newsletter called Austin B Updates every Monday, which is today. Every Monday around 10 o'clock, sometimes give or take a few hours. It's a process. And you'll get, it's basically a weekly wrap-up newsletter. So I'll have a subscription link to that in the show notes. And if you want to subscribe to the Austin B Media podcast, you can do so in the show notes. And hey, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or iTunes, whichever one, I'd really appreciate it if you rated me 5 stars and left a review. That I've heard that really helps discoverability. So yeah, if you have the time, go ahead and do that. And again, don't mean to push it, but you can support me on Patreon. Just search patreon.com/AustinBMedia and you can find me there. Until next time, this is Austin Belzer, signing off.